Number 37. Derrick Asp by James Riding. Derrick Asp had a placid, slow, waxy-looking face, a sickly smile and a tick, flicking his hair as if he was preening himself in a shampoo advert. With a tweed blazer and brogues, he affected the look of an eccentric university don, which made his tantrums and petty fancies all the more unexpected. He ran his own boutique consultancy with moderate success, but never resisted an opportunity to remind any who would listen that he was an ex-chief of staff at Bray & Company. Those 6 months in 1987 were the pinnacle of his life, and in his own estimation, he had not descended since. In his mind, he was still captaining the vast ship of a Big Three firm, and therefore any manner of heinous, splenetic behaviour was justified to give his way. He was also convinced of his guile and cunning, which manifested in reality as petulance more childish than his own school-aged daughter. Mr. Asp was proud of his credentials. "When I started at Compay Consulting Group," he purred, "I was given 10 additional presentations to prepare on my birthday. I locked myself in the office, toilets, and worked until cleaners came in the morning." He had distilled his education into Derrick's diktats, a list of demands bequeathed to each of his new employees, as this excerpt suggests. Derrick's diktats were challenging to follow. 13. You must be proactive and disrupt wherever possible. 14. You must never do anything that has not been approved to me in advance. 15. You must be interesting in the office, but not too interesting. A pompous, protean, pathetic cry-wolf in sheep's clothing, he ruled over his modest kingdom like a minnow leer, petrified that his staff were conspiring against him and permanently soliciting confirmation of his supremacy. Number 38. Fake News by John Bronsdon. It was Christmas Eve in the Oval Office. Jose Gonzalez, President Trump's personal assistant, knocked on the door and entered. He wore a thin coat with a scarf wrapped round his thin neck to keep away the chill in his office. Trump's office was also cold, and Trump had wrapped his coat tight around him. "No need to waste energy," he said. "A Merry Christmas," said Jose to Mr. Trump. "Fake news," said Trump. "I was hoping to have the day off tomorrow, Mr. Trump, and visit my family in Mexico," said Jose. "1 whole day? Do you think I got to be president of this greatest ever country in the whole world and being the greatest first man ever, even better than that Lincoln man, by taking days off? I'll let you have 1 day off if you can get me some of this corona stuff that everyone is talking about. Melania says it's much better for me than Coca-Cola. I hear they started making it in China. Bestest friend, my old mate Thingamy Bon Long, or is he from Korea? Thank you, Mr. Trump, and Merry Christmas again," said Jose. "Fake news," said Trump. "Don't forget I'm building this biggest and greatest ever big wall to keep your fellow scroungers out, and your country is paying for it, so don't delay or you will be locked out. Just remember, 1 day only, and I'll deduct more of your pay." Christmas, fake news, Trump says, one final time. Number 39. Lord Bercow of Snidebottom by Rob Hubble. The quality of England in this austere and numerically repetitive year of 2020 has become so tarnished as now to bear resemblance to the lower orders, often represented by clerks, tavern keepers, and country solicitors. Such a quality was Lord Bercow of Snidebottom, elevated beyond all possible reason for services so obscure as to merit a judicial review, were it not for the certainty that such a review would not report in his lifetime. His lordship, as he insisted on being addressed, and indeed his T-shirt proclaimed, was below average height, for which he compensated with red double-decker heels on his cowboy boots, and by effecting a backward tilt of the head, such that his highest point of his person appeared to be the tip of his very long Pinocchian nose. The redness of his face, not entirely coincidentally the self-same hue as in different claret wine, contrasted with a mop of straw-coloured hair that no barber would own to having scythed. Casual observers might even suppose he lacked the convenience of ears, such was the length of this stringy pile. In truth, as ears are generally used to listen, their lack, if lack there was, would not bother his lordship, as he abhorred the plebeian practice of listening, lest it be for the echo of his own squeaky voice, which he greatly admired. His chin was weak and unadorned with the hirsute extravagance above, but his mouth was large and invariably opens in the manner of a grouper fish. In stance he leaned forward, projecting his nose like a bowsprit, and balled his chubby fists so as to leave no doubt that he should not be trifled with. Lord Bercow of Snidebottom was indeed a man whose time had come, or so he believed. Number 40. Mrs. Staymery by Cara Bills. Mrs. Staymery was but 5'2" in stature, her back hunched in such a way that she appeared to carry the ever-increasing burden of her own frailty. Her skin, gnarled and faded by years of confinement, stretched thin as parchment paper about her skeletal frame, wrinkles and swollen veins bearing into every crook and crevasse, like an infinite timeline of the life that she had so well led. She was a proud woman, brimming with the familiarity and fondness of the memories that she carried with her throughout her years, like a cherished nostalgia box piled high with the stories of her youth. She emanated a warmth to those around her that brought new height to her otherwise shrunken posture, the iridescence of her eyes and the compassion in her voice breathing sincerity into each word that passed from her sunken lips. She was a woman dressed for every occasion, and yet no occasion addressed her. Pearls draped about her sagged neck, and her silver hair coiffed and glimmering, as if it with new-found hope for each passing day, every changing season, every rise and fall of the brazen sun. Not a trickle of menace befouled her muted voice as she spoke of her dancing days, her courtship and her kin, memories unfaded as the homespun cardigan that engulfed her slender shoulders. She was a woman who was given nothing and yet had everything to give, and was challenged anyone who but so refused to accept it as the makeup of her very existence. Generosity oozed through her veins and poured out through her spindly fingertips, her limp arms animated with each tale recollected, every act of immeasurable kindness. A woman of good faith, she wore the goodness of her heart on her raglan sleeve, and her tenderness as a brooch. Number 41. World Leader by Richard Morris. As the sun stirred, the dawn chorus began, slowly at first, but growing inexorably. The president lay in slumber, and the chorus invaded his dream, metamorphosing into the wild shouts of acclamation of his supporters. Slowly he opened his eyes, slowly because they resembled two small slugs and were difficult to lift. Most men, having exerted that amount of effort, would immediately have fallen asleep again. He rose and stared into the mirror. He saw perfection, missing the thin pursed lips, the downward droop of the mouth which gave him a sulky air, the white patches around his eyes providing a ghoulish look. The hair, oh, the hair! He carefully adjusted it to its ridiculous wave-like pattern. He mused on the day ahead, meetings with adoring public and important people, opportunity to assess the takings from his business empire, hypercritical messages to other world leaders unless he could claim credit, for them following his lead. If he had developed any academic intelligence, he may have discovered that Donald meant world leader in Gaelic. That would have delighted him. It is said it is hard to love yourself. The president, by exception, proved the rule, for he adored everything about himself. He swore he wanted to help the poor. He cared not a jot about their fate. He said he wanted a peace. He wanted world domination. He said he loved his wife. He regarded her as a mere exhibit, a vote-catcher. He was in truth a man not to be believed. Narcissus, like he admired himself, the world is lucky to have me. Someone had said that he was by the grace of God, leader of truth. Donald proudly emblazoned the motto on everything. DG, leader of truth. An intelligent man would have spotted the anagram, the artful dodger. Number 42. Whitley by Michael Fleming. Whitley, wearing menace like a tilted crown, crosses the carpeted space from office door to desk as though it's rugged hill terrain. He's as sharp as a dart in his handmade suit, but it's his gait that creates the first impression. The hammered knee imposes a limp that out in the street causes kids to reach for their mother's hand. Whiteley's cool with that. His gait is an emblem he's chosen not to lose to successful surgery. The heave to the right with every other step is the gnawing nub of his identity. He reaches the visitor's chair and lays a powerful hand on its back, letting the seated man take in the broadness of his chest, his Sherpa's thigh of a neck, and a look that says he's a forward slash away from losing it. Oh, how Whiteley loves his work, every break and bruise of it. But it's these moments when the infliction of pain on a deserving punter is so close he can almost caress it. They are the standouts. Whiteley hefts his steel walking stick. It's weighted in the lower third, beautifully balanced. With it, Whiteley can inflict bloodless suffering on an incremental scale. A collarbone can be clipped, a hand mashed, an Achilles whomped. The beating of kidneys is a house speciality. He lowers himself oh so slowly into the visitor's chair and roots his stick beside him, one hand on top. He raises a finger to let the slack-jawed, skitter-eyed blob before him know that it will be Whiteley who speaks first. But Whiteley waits. He allows the seconds to tick by. 5, 6, 7. And only then does he ask the sweating debtor, what precisely is the problem with the outstanding payment? Number 43. Sylvia Woodward by Laura Tapper. Sylvia Woodward was perfectly adapted to her habitat. A well-worn, pre-loved, hand-knitted sort of woman, out of step with the nipped, tucked and airbrushed modern world. Her clothes tended not to fit too closely. They left space for the kindness which defied containment, to ooze out of her every pore, pervade the atmosphere, spread around the shop, and fill every inch with her charity. To be sold amongst with other people's discarded belongings. If her entire ensemble was to hang on the display racks, you might buy it all for a fiver, yet the value of the woman herself was beyond human calculation. Strange that she was so frequently overlooked. As new donations arrived, she picked through them carefully, selling the best and dressing herself in the rest. A viscous pleated skirt from British Home Stores, a blouse with a bow at the neck, a throwback to the 80s, when she took dictation, made the tea and won the boss's affections, an acrylic mixed cardigan in a startling mauve, bagging at the elbows and slightly bobbly. When Sylvia was a small child, an alarming aunt had referred to her hair as mousy, and she had somehow drawn that word into her soul, so that it no longer simply denoted her colouring, but her personality as well. Scuttling about the dim, dusty interior of her premises, she had succeeded where physicists had failed in discovering the secret of perpetual motion, filling every available moment with the clicking of needles in the manufacture of tea cosies, booties and blankets to sell. Not a second was spared in her mission to make money for the cause. Her heart was broken because his hadn't worked properly. She managed the shop along with her grief that the same mightn't happen to someone else. Number 44. J.W. Marceau by Frederick O'Brien. J.W. Marceau was a model journalist, which is to say he wasn't much liked by anyone with something to hide. He had an uncanny knack for finding incriminating secrets and publish them, a quality many found disagreeable. The tattered old trench coat he invariably wore was at least 3 sizes too big, and so crammed were its various pockets with notebooks, pencils, film rolls, cigarettes, classified documents and half-eaten sandwiches that he rather resembled a generously padded scarecrow. Such was his effect on the sinners of Newport News, who took flight whenever he appeared, pencil in hand and spectacle eyes peering over his buttoned-up coat collar, like 2 anxious periscopes. Never before could just a few questions lead so reliably to ruin. Rumours persisted about the little black book he kept in a pocket over his little black heart. Each morning, as Marceau walked into the Newport News' office, the gentler souls of his neighbourhood approached him with their stories. My boy made the hockey team, my cat won an award, that kind of thing, and he would dutifully jot them all down. Whenever the paper needed to fill an inch or two, Marceau produced one of these little oddities. The editor's apoplectic fury would be briefly calmed, and the folks of the neighbourhood got a little piece of stardom. The editor was never terribly appreciative, but the folks of the neighbourhood were. The tales that didn't make the cut, Marceau piled on, and eventually around his desk, which, after years on the beat, was barely visible beneath an avalanche of paper. If one thing about J.W. Marceau was certain, it was that he had more stories than he knew what to do with. It seemed wrong to throw any away. Number 45. Man with a Painted Mask by Diane Horn. He was a portly man of ruddy face, sporting several chins that might in others have portrayed a generosity of spirit. Indeed, his grin appeared benevolent, and he greatly enjoyed the fruits of others' labour. But this happy countenance was a painted mask, hiding a venal, niggardly, extorting self-interest. He was oddly dressed for such a wretched day in London town, but no squally shower could lick this bigoty men. Nor did the scowls of the scattered passers-by upset his conscience, for he had no such affliction. The piano leg pegs on which he rolled were entirely uncovered below the knee. Above those pudgy joints, thin cotton shorts featured an unsuitably gay, flowery print. Stencil letters, stretched and strained by his ample gut, spelt out the word BOLLOCKS, a tribute to a punkish hero, and these were a more accurate reflection of his mood. The hastiness of his gait betrayed his impatience to escape this pestilent city, its former grand squares awash with the freshly dead. Soon he'd be relieved of the stench of those whose pension he'd magicked into the noxious air. For although he'd purchased their life's work, then leveraged and sold it for a miserly sum, they were so grateful for his business savvy and excellent management skills. After all, they've gifted him a floating palace to ensure his safety by warmer shores. no one could accuse him of lack of imagination. Number 46, Kyle by Christopher Swain. On most afternoons, Kyle could be found in the park. When not wandering aimlessly around, he would sit for long spells on one particular bench on the main path. He was about 15 years old. Every item of his clothing had a down-at-heel appearance. The faded and frayed jeans, the grey hooded top, and scuffed old trainers that were pinching his toes. All spoke of poverty. This was matched by his down-in-the-mouth demeanour, the result of lack of a different kind, of hope, horizons, and self-esteem. He should have been at school, but had dropped out. He had struggled to keep up with classmates, and no teacher had managed to tap into any innate curiosity. His home background had hindered rather than helped. Home life was chaotic, full of noise, but empty of any possible source of encouragement to engage his intelligence. He spent as little time there as possible. Social workers had made desultory attempts to make contact, but had moved on to other cases. From his place in the park, Kyle would see his former schoolmates going home. He could not but notice their smarter appearance, liveliness, and general air of progress. One or two would recognize him, but had little else to say. He felt quite alone. Except on that occasion when a stranger had engaged him in conversation, saying that he had come out from London to visit relations. Kyle had noticed him a few days earlier wandering round the park as if looking for something or someone. He had also noticed the expensive trainers and the smartphone which the stranger flaunted. The stranger had apparently noticed Kyle's interest in the trainers and mentioned casually that he could get a pair for Kyle if he would run an errand for him. Number 47. Daniel Twitcher, Pop Star Demigod by Chris Owen. In journalistic circles, it was said of Daniel Twitcher that he could be adjudged a self-made, self-determining young man for whom the attainment of wealth and fame was merely a stepping stone to greater personal glory. His outward demeanour, especially to fans, was one of easy affability. His twinkling blue-grey eyes could melt the hardest of hearts, male or female. But his comedian-like nature could also hide a darker, selfish purpose when required. Although worshipped as an Adonis-like figure, for Daniel physical attraction meant nothing. As a pop performer, his stock in trade was blatant sexuality, expressed in dubious lyrics and sensuously performed stage routines, catering to overexcited and slightly damp teenage girls. His personal manager and confidant, Barney Milkenham, said of him in this latest press release, "Daniel's is a sad case, really. A broken home, years in care, and a fundamental mistrust of others have left their mark. However, despite suffering life's myriad adversities, they have not stemmed his altruistic nature. On that note, I can exclusively announce that he has authorized me to tell me, the world, that in these troubled times he is stepping up to the mark to offer a huge donation to the coronavirus appeal. I will personally action this on his behalf, as he is currently self-isolating at his 40-acre estate on the tropical island of Utopia. This unprecedentedly generous gift, which will no doubt appease his detractors and hearten his boundless fan base, is sent with the personal message that he is thinking of you all in these dark days. And don't forget that his COVID-19 How I Beat the Virus World Tour will be back on for 2021. Details to follow as soon as available. Limited souvenir tour CD and T-shirts available online." Number 48. Skip Telfon by Chris Davies. Skip Telfon was a remarkable man, no doubt about that. This somewhat unprepossessing 30-something, who appeared to be in urgent need of a square meal and some exposure to daylight, appeared to have amassed a vast fortune by inventing a new version of the telegraph a contraption of astonishing speed and breadth. The billionaire strode through the corridors of his glass temple, seeming to float along the corridor so effortlessly in his designer sneakers and peaked cap, as if it were made of air and cast no shadow. He published good news, bad news, praise, scorn, invective, humour, scandal, tales of inspiration, and words of outright blasphemy and slander. It was all the same to him, as the money rolled in regardless. And as he was the only publisher, not the author, he took no responsibility for any of it. Such was his humility. Some accused him of being disingenuous and profiteering at the expense of the misery of those who had been offended and hurt by his wonderful invention. But such was his anonymity and humility, he took no credit or ownership of these unfortunate side effects. So on he floats down the corridors of power, carefully balancing his mochaccino, and fortunately nothing troubles him. Apparently, his is pleased that some of these issues have been brought to his attention, and although he is too busy to respond personally, he has asked his spokesperson to look into it urgently and earnestly hopes that we have a nice day.